Hi, everyone.
Hey, so I'm James Barron. This is Carter Foster, our distinguished guest today. Welcome, Carter.
Thank you. Nice to be here virtually.
So, brief introduction. Carter has been at the Blanton Museum in Austin, Texas, and since 2016. Before that, from 2005 to 2016, he was at the Whitney Museum, the Cleveland Museum from 96 to 2004. Did an internship in Philadelphia, New York Public Library from 93 to 96. And he graduated from Brown University in 91, which is something which actually both Carter, Dawn, and I share. A couple of brief thank yous. Joe and Susan of Pierogi Gallery, thank you always for the collaboration. Truly appreciated. And Dawn was grateful every single moment of the decades that you represented and still represent her work. I'd like to thank Liz Knowlton, the assistant to my gallery, who put together the PowerPoint and had an invaluable contribution. Hasty Cross, who is always brilliant and fabulous. Dylan Everett, who's the tech guy who saves me since I'm a technophobe. So Carter, I think what we're gonna do is start with the moment, oops, let's see if I can get this going. Here we are. The moment where I really got to know you was this. I was at your show, Edward Hopper at the Whitney. I was with Dawn and I was with Karen Wilkin, and we were looking at these two drawings, and you came up to us, should say towered above us, and said, I don't remember if it's 39, 41, or 43 lines in the work on the left.
We could count it now. I don't remember. I think it's 42, but yeah, I love making this point that these are two studies for Nighthawks, the famous iconic Edward Hopper painting. And the reason we're doing this is both its connection to Dawn, who loved Hopper, and a little bit about my history, I guess. But I love these two drawings because one is so spare. The one on the left is, they're literally, you can count the strokes of chalk that there is. And then the one on the right is much more tonal and dense. But I always wonder if this is the moment when Hopper thought about making this a night scene, because you have this shading in the upper left in the drawing on the right that like turns the sky dark. And without that, it might be a day scene. You don't know. It's sort of interesting to me. So I love you can just see Hopper's process in these works. And of course, Dawn was all about drawing, and I'm sure she, the fact that you saw the show with her, I'd love to know what she was saying.
Oh my God, she loved Hopper. There was a lot about Hopper's process that interested her. This is a picture of Dawn from Civitella Ranieri, where she did a residency in 2013. A great moment. It was before she became sick. She was in full health. She was absolutely ripping it that summer in her work, walking, and I think it's just kind of a fabulous picture. This is the Whitney Biennial. So Carter, Dawn was incredibly grateful that you included her in the Whitney Biennial.
It was me indirectly in that I introduced the curators who was Gary, Carrie, and Murray, who's now at the New Museum, and Francesco Bonami, who did this biennial. But I think because of me, they knew her work, and because I had acquired her work, which happened because of Pierogi. And Pierogi, I got a call from Pierogi one day, I think Joe called me and said, we have this donor who has this large drawing that he can't really do much with in his house because Dawn worked at this huge scale often, and would you be interested in that? I didn't know her work, but she was already in the Whitney collection, so understandably they called us, and we ended up acquiring the work, and that's when I met Dawn and became a huge fan. And it also, the person who donated it, a guy named Marty Hale, ended up becoming one of my best friends. So there's such a nice, Dawn is like that kind of person who has that kind of karma around her. She does.
Totally.
She's an incredible person.
This is a video that the Whitney put on. I'm just going to play a short bit of it. This is the entrance to her studio. There was this sort of phenomenal moment where Dawn was so excited about this, to be in the Whitney Biennial. She loved the Whitney because the Whitney really is the artist's museum, and she liked to be included in that family. I was living in Rome at the time, and I decided to surprise her. So I flew back. I got in about 4:30, back at a hotel, and there she was in the lobby, on Madison Avenue, and she just let out this hoot that everybody who knew her knows, this kind of exclamation of joy that she had, but it was very, very special. So do you want to talk about this piece a little bit, Carter?
Sure. So, I mean, I think what's so interesting about her work is, I mean, first of all, we think of drawing as like an intimate thing, and it is intimate, and her work is intimate. But what's different about her work than what we think about drawing is the scale. I mean, she found a way to make her work intimate, but it's also she often worked at a very large scale, a bodily scale, there's a relationship to the human body, and that has to do with I mean, she would work in small sections, but she would piece these pieces together with multiple sheets, and so there's not like some symmetry, or they unfold the way a film unfolds. And is this one based on a film? Do you know? I actually don't know.
Yeah, this is from My Reputation from 1946. And here's a work that's actually in the Whitney, another one which...
But this is how I got to know her. This is what was donated to her, to the Whitney when I worked there. And so, she has there's this phenomenological aspect to her work where you get the sense of her embodiment in her own, her presence in her own body. And this is a great example of that, because here she's actually, I think it's probably, she would often draw what was in front of her, whether it was a film. Sometimes she was obsessed with film, as you know, and so the films would be in front of her and she would draw them frame by frame, and so the drawing would unfold. She would create a drawing that would unfold in a manner similar to a film in a sense, but then here it's like the space around her is unfolding in a sense, and she's going section by section from what she can see. And so, like, even though she's depicting something that's three-dimensional around her, she's treating it like you would pan a room with a film camera or something, except she's doing it with her head and her hands.
I should mention, this is actually her apartment. So that's the kitchen on the left, moving towards the refrigerator. And there was an incredible amount of clutter. And I would say to Dawn that I thought she was almost like a snail who was painting the inside of her shell. And
that's a beautiful metaphor, really, honestly.
She loved that. And she said, oh my God, that's so perfect, because there was something very hermetic about Dawn. I mean, she turned out to be incredibly social. She had a group of friends almost unlike anybody I've ever met. However, her work was really solitary. And could you imagine how long it took to draw this?
Yeah, and I don't know if you have any, I mean, also, you can't really tell in this, but there's so much texture and so much of her own energy in each piece. She's worked with, like, in that case, it was ink, I believe. And so each line like vibrates, with her energy, and the unfolding of it in slow time is there, but also there is she's drawn, but she's also, it's not that it's slow, I mean, there's so much, she's drawing so much, there's a density to it as well that's quite impressive. And also the text, she would play with the texture of the support of the paper, which often, I mean, the paper itself was almost as important as the ink on it, because it had a texture to it, and she'd respond to that texture. And then the way you can see none of her sheets are regular sheets, right? I mean, sometimes she would use a square sheet of paper or a rectangle, but often they're, especially in the large scale works, you see they have irregular edges. And, I think they have a dreamlike quality too. It's very much about her living in her own head,
She would often start out very small. She might start out doing a still life of Mir on a table, and then she would say, I have to include this, or she would add to the paper. So sometimes something would start out even like 12 by 12 inches, and then it would end up being 255 inches wide by the time it was done. And I once said to her, why do you do that? She said, I want to know what it's going to look like. And I said, really? She said, it's as simple as that. I really want to know what it's going to look like when I'm done. Now, the next piece is another one from the Whitney.
Yeah.
Where, she was very interested in soap opera and melodrama, and she would connect these characters and make a grid out of them. Is this a piece that you had looked at often, Carter?
So I got when we were, I be honest, I didn't know her work when we were offered the piece, but when we were offered the piece from Pierogi and Martin Hale, I was enthralled by it. So I of course I checked, and she had already been in the collection, which in some ways makes it easier to acquire more work. And this is wonderful, but I mean, the other piece is more, I would say, more typical of her work.
Oh yeah,
it's an early era.
This is 2002.
Yeah.
And now here we are in 2004, where she started.
This piece is amazing. This piece I included in a show. After I got to know her work, I was approached by the Kunsthalle in Vienna to work. They were trying to organize a show about Edward Hopper and contemporary art, and this is before I did the Hopper drawing show. But it was, I started working with the director there, and on the loans, but it made so much sense to include Dawn in this show and her interest in film in particular. You know, Hopper had a great interest in film, and this is a piece called Travels with Myra Hudson. And what's so fascinating about it is that it's, like I was talking about earlier, it unfolds the way a film unfolds, but here it goes from, like, you start at the right. So Myra Hudson's, if I recall correctly, I have seen the movie, but it's been a while. But she takes a train journey across America from, I think, the East Coast or maybe Chicago to San Francisco. So what you're seeing from the right to the left is, you can see that's a train compartment. And then John starts drawing the frames of the film, and then it unfolds into her entering this space in San Francisco. So it really represents this long journey. And you know, the way film scrolls and is time-based, I mean, this is sort of time-based. If you start from, you could walk this drawing from the right to the left, and it unfolds the way the film unfolds. So she found a fascinating parallel way in drawing to represent a film type of space, which I just don't know any other artist who figured it out the way she did, or who executed the way she did. It's so interesting.
You should sort of mention that it's 552 inches wide. I mean, yeah. Some mathematician out there do the math. I mean, that's an insanely huge work.
Yeah.
And she was not a huge person. I mean, she was small in stature. She was incredibly strong. The quickest walker I've ever met. We walked a lot, and I would sometimes have to skip and almost do like a semi-jog when I would fall behind.
I love it. Can you go back to that sheet for 1 second?
Yeah, sure.
I just want to, I love the fact that it goes to two different levels. Like when you hit the stairs, she actually moves the drawing up, and then you go on a different level. Right. And in that sense, her drawings are really sculptural. I mean, they really are a form of sculpture, because sometimes they can wrap a room. You can show them in a way that you can, they can wrap corners, so they surround you. So there's this aspect of installation and sculpture to her work, which is also reinforced by the texture of the paper, and also the fact that, the word performative is overused these days, but her drawing was a type of performance in a way. I mean, you can, because of there's a time-based aspect to the execution that you can sense when you're looking at the work in a way that you don't when you're looking at a single piece of paper where you take in the image all at once.
Well, and it's almost like the camera starting on the right, and it's
zooming. Yeah.
Then you get the stairs, and you're going up the stairs with the camera, and then you're panning to the left. I mean, what an incredible concept to go up the stairs. And I think I would agree with you. Is there anybody else who's done something like that?
It's unusual, and it really is based on the film too. I mean, this corresponds to the frames of the film. I actually gave a talk about this drawing once, where I don't even know where that PowerPoint is anymore, but I froze the frames of the film and showed how she do it. But of course, she's adapting it, and I don't think the film's in black and white. I think it's in color, but I can't remember.
It's interesting, because with any of these works, we could elaborate for a long time. Here we're in Hopperland, study of compartment C.
Well, this just because Hopper dealt with trains and also was a film lover. Several of his works. This is a work that's in a private collection, but deals with a woman in a train car, and so it's connected to what we were just looking at, because like the first frame of Dawn's drawing sort of looks very much like this, or similar to this. It's a similar setting. It's inside a train car, it's interesting, the parallels. And there you go.
Yeah. So this is Dawn's travel with Myra Hudson, and she loved Hitchcock. She adored Hitchcock, and scenes in the train on Hitchcock or in Hopper were a very big influence on her work.
You said you used to go to the Met with her and look at Edward Hopper paintings.
Yeah, I can't remember if we have this in the PowerPoint, but there's a lighthouse. We
have it somewhere. I'm not sure where it is.
Liz, do we have it in the PowerPoint? There's a lighthouse, and Dawn would say, "Oh, James, look at that. There's not a white in there. It's all green, it's gray, it's beige, it's red, it's ochre. There's not a white." But Hopper is deceiving you into thinking the whole thing is white. So, like with many artists, going to a museum is such a different experience. I would always love it to have her perspective. So one of Dawn's favorite paintings is the Hopper on the right. And we thought we'd put it in with the Flatiron Building. Carter? Yeah,
this is a good illustration. So I worked a lot on this painting, New York Movie. Hopper was he would amalgamate different things in his head and they would end up on canvas. But he studied real life very closely. But when he was actually painting, he would use his drawings when he painted, but he wasn't necessarily painting a real place. But this painting is in fact based mostly on a theater that he went to, and the left half of the painting is pretty accurately close to what the theater looked like, which is no longer there. But I found period photographs of it. But then the right, he kind of collapses several different spaces to create the space for the usherette, who's in this uniform, this sort of quasi-military uniform, which was typical of the time. But this is, Hopper, he said things like, when I can't paint, I go on a movie binge. And he would, I think movies, he just loved going to films. And, he's depicting this sort of ambiguous scene in this film, but this is a kind of testament to, it's about the act of movie going as much as it is about film itself. But he was definitely a film lover. And, of course, he's making a metaphor between what goes on in your head and what goes on the screen, and the relationship between those two things.
It's interesting, he lived pretty close to the Flatiron Building, and that crowd.
Pretty close, yeah. He lived on Washington Square, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting to see that relation. And then here's Dawn.
That's a nice comparison, yeah.
So Mrs. William Sutton from Whirlpool, and we have this video. I'm not sure if it's going to work. I'm tempted to try it, but I'm going to have Liz lead me through it. Okay, so I hope you're seeing this, but there's a moment here, right there. Do you see that?
Yeah, that's great.
So what she would do is freeze the frame if it was a video, and then she would draw it. The work on the left is with a ballpoint pen, and look at how she gets the white on the hair and on that necklace. I mean, this is really her process, Carter.
Yeah, it's a real tour de force of drawing, honestly.
And that's a small work. She did a lot of these small things, and I don't think she distinguished so much in importance with the small work and the larger.
That's a nice comparison. That's great. I love that. That's one of my favorite images by Hopper, period, in any medium. It's a print that he did called Night Shadows, and it's so interesting because film helped me understand this work. I couldn't figure out what this work actually was, in a sense. And then I found this, I was doing research, and I found this film that recorded one of the last elevated trains to be torn down in New York. And I realized that this is the perspective from the L train, when you're looking down, and Hopper doesn't give any indication of you're being on the train. He doesn't show like you're the inside of the car. It's like typical Hopper. You're just sort of floating in space. But if you this film made it very clear, because I have stills from it that basically show this point of view. It shows a man walking on a sidewalk with a shadow of a street lamp being cast over that. And so, it's interesting that the film point of view helped me understand this drawing, which is kind of a camera point of view. And I talked to the film director. I was lucky enough to give Wim Wenders a tour of a Hopper show that I did. And I asked him about Hopper and filmmaking, because he loves Hopper. And he said, in a Hopper work, you always know where the camera is. And I thought, like, what a brilliant statement that is. And another person has said about Hopper that he's one of the most influential photographers of the 20th century, even though, of course, he never took a photograph. I mean, he took photographs maybe for personal use, but he was not a photographer.
And Hitchcock too, I would say, right? So Dawn was obsessed with Hitchcock, and she also had sort of an incredible stamina on just about everything she did. To be able to do those drawings, she did scenic design before to pay the bills for a long time, and she could stay up for 24 hours doing a scenic design. We went to a Hitchcock Film Festival at Brown when we first got there in '78, and she could watch endlessly, and she would like nudge me and say, "You can't go to sleep right now. This is the most amazing scene." So she was incredibly enthusiastic about everything. Here's another of her influences with cinema, Antonioni, and she's just freezing the frame there. Again, ballpoint pen on the right, a small work.
Did she always work from film? Did she always work from film from the time you knew her, in terms of making her drawing?
Incredibly obsessed with film. And I was thinking this morning that we had a film society at Brown, and a guy named Steve Katz ran it. And Dawn would tell him some of the films. They were both complete film nerds. And they would get this program. And then Dawn would do the calendar every week. And she would do little compartmental drawings, very much like what you're seeing right here. And that would be the calendar. She'd say like, December 18th, 7 p.m., and she would say yellow sky, and she'd have this. So there were many times where I would say to her, hey, it's Sunday, come on, let's get in the car, let's go to a flea market and, in the country. And she said, no, I can't, I've got to finish this calendar. So then she'd be working intensely on it. They'd make Xeroxes of it, put it all over the campus, like on, telephone poles and stuff like that. Eventually it'd all be thrown away. She threw away all these things that she did, but they were very, very much like what you see right there.
Was Todd Haynes at Brown when you guys were there?
Yeah, so Todd, she was in semiotics. She took a break from Brown, and I'm older, so I graduated. And she went back into semiotics, and Todd was there. And they actually do share something. Semiotics was very important to Dawn because they were having to take notes, and she would take visual notes of the films in the black with this camera clattering. And these visual notes became her style with excerpts of dialogue. So that was a very formative period. I'm going to go through some of these so we can get to the art historical things, but Sudden Fear, Joan Crawford, who she adored. And she would watch documentaries on Joan Crawford as she was doing her drawings. So that's Sudden Fear. And you can see she's focusing on that lamp. Here we are with Katrine and Ludwig. Another frozen frame. Here, well, Hitchcock and Hopper.
I do one day want to do a show on Hopper and film. Here's
kind of a quote that I thought was worth looking at. Like cinema, it moves and the experience takes time and maybe is slower. Some works of art are slow. They walk instead of run. I think a lot of my work is slow. And I think that's a point.
It literally unfolds in front of you. I mean, like it literally unfolds like a sheet of paper. The paper's unfolding in front of you. It's when she does these large scale works.
This is the sort of thing that she was reading all the time. She actually gave me this book. She had it in 2006, Looking at the Overlooked. And then we get into some of these comparisons. She
That's really nice.
James Ensor. And I hope that my square is covering up the flower on the right, but there's a flower that Dawn did on the left, which is directly either in memory or actual from James Ensor. Let's talk about temporality, Carter. I mean, fruit that's here today, it's sweet, it's gone. Temporality seems like a very big part of her work, don't you think?
Yeah, and it's absolutely, yeah, and I mean, literally the way a film unfolds in time or drawing unfolds in time, and she was just talking about slowness, and of course, still life. The basic metaphor in much still life painting is that it's showing something organic that's from nature that has a life cycle that's gonna die, and so it's often about reflecting on the cycle of life and death that we all are part of.
And she was very aware of that. I mean, she was. In her youth, she had had an accident, and it had been quite serious. And I think that those of us, including me, who'd had something early on in our life, we never fully believe that necessarily we're entitled to a full life, that things could happen very quickly, which in fact is what happened.
Where did she grow up?
She grew up in Chelmsford, and there's kind of a wonderful thing. Her family home, she brought me there in '78 for Thanksgiving, and she insisted I wear a Hawaiian shirt, which I was like, I can't go to your family home in a Hawaiian shirt. This is ridiculous. I look like a clown, but I in fact did. And she showed me her home. Her father drew 10, not 11 and not 9 drawings every single day, and he had piles of them in his basement, in accumulation, very much like Dawn. In the attic, she had gotten a bedroom in the attic, and there was a pitched roof right above her bed. 3 brothers. They were brought up. Her parents gave them everything in the way of education and arts. But she drew on top of this flowered wallpaper in the attic. And when it came time to sell the family home, her mother called her and said, Dawn, I was kind of thinking, do you want the attic? And she said, what do you mean, do I want the attic? She said, well, I think we could take the sheetrock off and we could save it because I've been looking at it. And you know what? It looks a lot like your work right now. And so her mother actually got the sheetrock off the wall.
Oh my God, that's crazy.
Very much like that. So here we are with Chardin and Dawn.
That's a beautiful comparison. Yeah.
My God. So the piece on the left is a Clementine. There had been, quite a horrific day, which was 2016 when Trump was elected. And that was the day that she got a notice that she had something called triple negative, which I'd never heard of, but the doctor explained she had 1 to 5 years to live. So 2 days after that, Dawn and I went to Napoli and we ate these Clementines in a little alleyway. And I gave her a bag to take home. So what she did is she did this watercolor she gave to Jeanette and me, and then she expanded it into a work called 3 Tables Rome, which was 253 inches wide. And it's so much about her process, this thing, but also appreciating this sweet moment and trying to capture it. But
was she referencing this painting specifically? Because this is so striking how the orange is so...
a voracious appetite for looking at art and thinking about art and reading about it. So it's hard to really know. I'm not sure if I could answer. It would have been a question I would have liked to have asked her, because
I mean, the way it's not surprising she loved Chardin, because there's a way, although Chardin tended to work on a small scale, although he did some larger paintings, but there's such a texture to his painting, and you just feel his subjectivity in the paint in a way that you feel it in her drawings, I think, because there's a materiality to her drawings where she's infusing it with her own touch, and you get that in Chardin's paintings too, even though very different mediums.
Here's another Chardin. So again, temporality, the bubble's there, it's beautiful, and it's going to be gone. And that's really a moment.
Yeah.
She was really looking at that moment. But look at also, there's this voyeur. I mean, somebody peeking over the windowsill.
Yeah, his little brother maybe.
Here's the Clementine. This is in our show. She did a numbers notebook from June 17th till November 26th, the day after Thanksgiving, which was really 9 days before she died. I know she wanted to finish this notebook really badly. There are maybe about 30 or 40 empty pages at the end. But we could talk a little bit about these tickets. There's a great quote where Dawn is talking about how she understands that a diamond is worth more than a laundry ticket or a parking ticket, but to her, when she's drawing them, they have equal value. To me, that's one of the secrets to understanding her work.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Absolutely, it's just such a beautiful quote. I mean, you've told me that before, and or she maybe herself said that to me, and it's beautiful, because it's all about when you're creating something, depicting something in an artwork, it just takes on a completely different meaning. It can be a symbol of that, it could be a symbol of life, it could be a symbol of the cycle of life, whatever. I mean, but suddenly you're the one who creates the context for it, and in the context you're creating as an artist, of course a diamond can be just as valuable as a theater ticket or something of great personal meaning to you. And that in a way, that's what the symbolist movement is about, which I'm sure, Ensor is sort of related to that. Or I think of someone like Redon, who, is and I'm sure that's an artist who was important to her too, because there's actually a lot of similarities, especially his pastels.
So one thing I want to point out about this notebook is that during this period, she was going through the ups and downs, the hills and valleys of all these different treatments. And anybody who's ever experienced it through someone they love, through a friend or a family member, knows that it's just a barrage of numbers. You're hearing all these numbers. And I would say to Dawn, don't you think there's something about these numbers? Like, what does this mean? 1386. And it's just a number. It's just a number. But I think she did understand that she was living in a world of numbers at that moment. And the drawing that you're looking at was done right at the very end. She was in hospice. She had a rule. She always had rules for her work. With this, she could do 1 or more number drawings a day, but she couldn't skip a day. And there were only 4 days where she had hit a very rough period, and she gave herself the break of not doing that. And at the very end, she said, I'm going to stop. And I said, you've just got to keep going. This book means so much to you. She said, I just don't like the way the numbers look right now, and I'm just going to stop. I'm okay with that.
So does that the what you were just showing that? So that's the last work she made before she died, essentially, right?
That is, and I was also very worried, in a hospital environment, that you've got this incredible historical, fabulous artwork. I was afraid it could go missing because, God only knows at that moment she had periods where she'd be, sleeping and they were administering drugs and whatnot.
Yeah.
But fortunately, it came in this really beautiful blue Smyson, kind of cover. And I promised her that we're going to get it published, and we are. Just a complete facsimile. And there's a
Oh, that's great.
we did an interview. Jeanette, who many of you might know out there, my wife Jeanette, and my kids were incredibly close with Dawn. And I had this idea that we would get Dawn and her mother up here for a weekend. And this is right before she went into the hospital and hospice, so they could have a mother-daughter weekend. And she was still doing these, and that's when I did an interview with her, which is on the James Bernhardt site. And it's incredible because her mind was so expansive. She would start talking about Hogan's Heroes, and she would say, James, like, do you know that in Hogan's Heroes, the commandant, he was a survivor of the Holocaust? I was like, what? And she'd say, look, like almost all the German soldiers were survivors of the Holocaust. Like, what do you make of that? You're a Jew. And then it would be this conversation that would spin around like that.
Incredible. Oh, wow.
But the next Zoom, which by the way is going to be on January 7th, Judy Glansman and Angela Dufresne, is going to be on Dawn and her artistic circle. Her influence was huge. And on the 14th of January, we're going to have Joe and Susan.
Wonderful. Well, her memorial was a testament. I mean, it was so moving, her memorial, and the people that you could just tell how many people she affected so deeply. It was really something.
And as a teacher,
Yeah.
we would talk in the morning, and she'd be going to a class. She'd say like, God, I'm so worried about this still life I'm setting up, and I really have to get there early, and I just have to look at this. And I said, like, I'm sure it's gonna be great. And she said, I'm just not sure if this, if I'm gonna put this jar in front of the bottle or behind it. And it's really an important thing. And then she would get there. And so her students, she would put this extra oomph into her teaching. And there was a memorial at RISD, which was a phenomenal place for her. And all the students said,
did she take classes at RISD when she went to Brown? Do you know? Was it a joint thing?
Yeah, I mean, most of us took classes down at RISD. I took photography down there, Doug Prince, but she did take some down there, and she did studio art.
She wasn't enrolled at RISD. She was a Brown student. Yeah, interesting.
Brown. And the funny thing is, she could have done many things. She was also trained as like a singer. She could have been an opera singer.
I didn't know that. It's great. Wow.
Yeah, and she played the piano, like a concert piano. This, by the way, is from the gallery that I had in Kent. This is Three Tables, Rome. So there was a moment in this where she was in Rome for 2 months at the American Academy, and her treatment was getting more severe. And she decided to include on the right, the brown portion of that, there's some packets for her therapy. And
drug therapy, yeah?
Yeah, and she said, do you think that I should put them in? I said, I think you have to, because this is your journey, but also this is going to stand as a testimony for someone, not only the person going through this process, but for those who love that person. We've been on that journey. It's practically everybody has been with somebody who's going through this horrific thing. She was very interested in lamps. There's one in the middle, and that old telephone.
Can you go back to that for a second?
Yeah, sure.
That's just an incredible drawing, and I love the way it's a still life, of course, but it's also, it's an interior, it's a landscape in some ways, it's a mindscape, of course, like all her work. But I love the way it goes from the turned up tabletop, that flattens the picture plane, into like an open, perspectival space, all in one sheet, and of course the reference here for me is Cezanne watercolors. I think it makes me think of Cezanne watercolors for sure, which I'm sure she knew and admired.
Yeah, actually, going through a show of drawings with Dawn was really, you had to have a lot of patience. Like, we went to the Michelangelo show, and I was kind of like, oh my God, Dawn, do we have to spend 15 minutes on every drawing? Like, we're going to be old people by the time we get out of the show. But she was absorbing it. So back to your question, was she making a direct reference? She had almost a photographic memory for artwork, and maybe she just digested it completely because she'd taken the time.
Yeah, well, she looked very closely.
But there's that cinematic shift where it goes, from one perspective to another, to
Yeah.
a third. By the way, on the very far left, it's really hard to see, but to the right of the purple flowers, hyacinths, is that little Clementine. So she
Oh,
did the same piece, which was about 12 by 12 inches. And then it expanded like that until she had done the 3 tables in her studio at Rome, at the American Academy. And mind you, this is when she was in treatment, having received a prognosis that she had 1 to 5 years with no cure. So to me, the show that we have up here, or a work like this, is about the bravery, I find it not a sad show. To me, it's a show about courage. It's about the human spirit. It's about resilience. Is that you couldn't knock this person over. She just had too much life force in her. So here's, a few more artists that she just adored, and they're all referring to each other.
Yeah. That great Chardin painting in the Louvre.
Oh God. And,
Amazing.
Soutine and Ensor with the skate, it's like, and again, mortality. So here we get into a work that's.
Can I ask you a question?
Mm.
Did you ever watch her work? Did you actually ever watch her work?
Oh, yeah.
Or did she,
I've got videos, and we have them on the site, the gallery site, James Barron Art. There's one that my assistant in Rome took, named Sarah Brill. She was a videographer, and she did a really beautiful film. And we'll probably even put the longer version. I think we have like 40 minutes of her drawing in sumi ink of a hyacinth. And it's absolutely incredible. I took a film of her on October 28th, which was the day before she went to the city and went to the hospital, then hospice. And she was doing one of the numbers, and she was listening to, on YouTube or something like this, something on Betty Davis, about how she was like getting her Academy Award and the life of Betty Davis. So that's a little bit about what this is about here. So this is The Name of the Rose, a self-portrait when she was at Mcdowell, which is the summer before she died. The one on the left is her hand bandaged. She had traveled out to Detroit for a residency, for a lecture at Cranbrook, and her arm became inflamed afterwards. So she had to have it bandaged. And then she expanded it from that on the left to the one in the middle, and then the one on the right where she went full vertical. And what she said to me in the hospital was, James, I was so lucky to get to Mcdowell. I'd been feeling really good, so they allowed me to go, and I was able to work every day. And what I learned from this is I learned how to be abstract by being realistic. Those were her exact words. I thought she was so close really to the end, but she was still learning.
I love the way her drawings, like it's almost like they're literally growing, like they grow organically. And the fact that this is like a vertical, and you just get the sense that she didn't necessarily have in her mind what she was going to end up with, but she just let it like literally grow while she was doing it. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's the sense you get from looking at them. Yeah.
It's totally true, and it's a really important point. She did not know what it was going to look like when she was done. Yeah. And then with this, listening to The Name of the Rose, it would take probably 2 to 3 hours to read all the text that's on the left. You probably can't see it on this, but there's so much text where she's quoting. And
based on the book, the Umberto.
Yeah, she was listening to the audio. We put this next to Bonnard, who she just loved. Yeah. She loved these bathtub scenes.
There's so many parallels with the way. Hold on one second. Sorry.
Sure. So what she's looking at here, it's almost like the camera panning down and then zooming up. It's 2 different perspectives, and she was thrilled by that. And also, if you look at the blue cloth, the background, and then you go back to the blue cloth on the image on the right, it's almost as though she's riffing on that blue card. I'm just talking about the blue fabric on the lower right of the drawing here. Yeah. And then you come here to Bonnard. But she would say to me, like, James, it's all wrong, this perspective, but it's right. So
well, it's the way you experience, it's like, again, it's phenomenological. It's the way you experience space in your mind, or the way your mind translates a spatial experience. And it's not, it's not through mathematical formula, or it's not, one point, linear perspective is a very false thing if you compare it to the human mind. And she's doing, her work's about how the mind experiences space, and that's what Bonnard's doing too, and
Exactly.
also the way Bonnard, like, it's, you sense it's you understand it spatially to a degree, but he flattens the space out, he manipulates it, and that's what she was doing.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's looking down her body at her leg and at her shoe and her feet. And she was continually and always obsessed with her shoes and her feet. Here's another one, Cotán.
That's a great comparison.
So, yeah, and it's really interesting. She said, James, like, the mandate here is I can draw these objects with sumi, paint them, but they can't touch. And wow, we have only 5 minutes till it's 45.
That's one of her rules for this. Like she was making a rule for herself.
She would make these rules, and I think it was her way of controlling things. Here's a work in our show, this black and white tabletop from 2010.
Great, wow.
The cross in the middle is a really powerful thing. We're comparing it here with Peter Klaas, but you can see the cross. She looked at it and she said, James, I couldn't figure out why in the world I put that cross. And then she said, but then I got it. Her father, who she was very close with, had died in a bicycling accident at the bottom of a ravine. And this cross, I think, appeared as a memorial for her father. But there's shoes. There are no less than 5 shoes in this. And it's really amazing because Jeanette had found a shoe at a place called Miss France in Rome, which is this antique shop, thrift store that opens like at 11:30 or midnight, stays open till 4, like whenever this woman feels like it. So we went back and we bought this shoe and gave it to her. And she was just enthralled. And again, here we are with the diamond, being the shoe's worth as much as a diamond.
Right. What I love about that image is how she doesn't depict the tabletop. It's like just the objects on the table. So the surface is something you complete with your mind, in a sense. I mean,
and the fold in the paper almost suggests the cloth of the table.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
I'm going to go quickly through a couple pictures in our show because unfortunately so few people are going to see it because of COVID. But this is our world, and it's okay.
But we have we have 67 people who tuned in. That's nice.
Yeah.
Hi everyone. Thank you.
The people who have seen it, it's been a really breathtaking experience. My photographer, Douglas Branson, he called me after taking the installation pictures. He called me that night and he said, James, I had a spiritual experience in that show when you left me alone. It was amazing. And there was a woman who came and she was looking at these, at the notebook, and then she kind of like, her lips started to quiver and she caught her breath and she ran into the other room and she was sobbing, and she came back and she said, James, those packets, those chemo packets, I know them. And I said, oh, really? And she said, yes, the show has touched me so deeply.
Well, that's the way Dawn was as a person. She was just like that.
Touched everybody. I mean, and I still feel she's very much alive. I mean, in this show, I feel her vibrancy. This is the upper gallery where, I think she would have loved it.
It looks beautiful.
Works together. Paper flowers, with these paper whites. Jeanette grows these in her home, and I asked if I could borrow it for the show. And she said, yeah, but they're dying. And I said, yeah, that's perfect. That's exactly what Dawn, that's the moment. But Dawn would be trying to record these and she couldn't keep up with the growth. So it would go from growth and, rebirth to growth to death. That's a close up of it. And in there is the title of our show. And I think maybe we don't have a close up of it, but
what's on the table there?
This is the lower gallery. And oh God, I wonder if Liz, do we have a picture? On the table, we have all these, all her numbers that she did, and then the actual parking tickets and laundry tickets. It's staggering. You could get a teeny glimpse of it here. This is Triptych. This is Mcdowell Triptych. That's the central panel. This is kind of interesting because there was a moment where she was doing this and she said she'd done the tabletop. She'd done it here in orange and black, then here in color, and then she'd done it here and she said, oh God, James, I know I shouldn't do this. It's gonna take forever. I'm gonna do the outside of the window.
That's an amazing drawing. That's incredible.
Yeah. It was like signing yourself up for, I don't know.
So is that like leaves and growth?
It's leaves and it's plants, it's branches, it's trees. And, even to have the courage to say, I'm going to do this. Oh, this is a really kind of an amazing thing. This is a Mcdowell, again, that summer before she died, where she got this, candy colored, rainbow colored double mirror. And everybody who came in and saw this drawing, all the other residents said, you should show this reflecting something. And she said, but it's reflecting a blank sky, and I'm not gonna change that. And so she had this rule, like people said, maybe you should put something in the, in the distance so it would be reflected in the mirror. And she said, I can't do that. It's just too artificial.
So interesting, because it makes that a very ambiguous object. Like you don't know what it is. I certainly didn't know it was a mirror until you told me.
Yeah, and one of the things I said at the memorial, which was like incredibly moving to me, when we were talking about this when she was in the hospice, this work, which she thought was one of her greatest works, and I agreed. And she said, James, you're going to be walking down the streets of Manhattan one day. It's going to be overcast. You're going to see a mirror that somebody discarded, and you're going to think of me. And I thought,
Oh
what a
God.
beautiful thing. This is another work in the.
I just want to read a comment in the chat which says, in the 1976 Chelmsford High School yearbook, Dawn beat out George Condo for most talented. That's nice.
Yeah, well, and she stayed in touch a little bit with George Condo, which was nice. This
He's
is
a nice guy.
Pont Avant, where she would sometimes express the distance between objects with a reference like the illumination in the wall. Well, we're at the end of our slides. This is a portrait she did of me in 78 or 79.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
That's
And
great.
there's one of her shoes. That's a Polaroid I took of Dawn's shoes in 78 and her leopard skin purse. And I thought I would close the slide presentation with this from Jeanette. Jeanette would always send her parking tickets and laundry tickets. And Dawn had kept this. And in a way, we found things when we went into her apartment because she collected and saved just about everything. But I love that Jeanette had said, I'll never think of parking tickets in the same way after seeing what you do with them. Much love, Jeanette. And Dawn would say, it's funny because you send me these parking tickets. They're always like in such rough, beat up condition. But like, it looks like Jeanette's has ironed them before she sends them to me. I love Jeanette's parking tickets. Are there some questions that we could take really quickly, Liz?
I don't see any of them. I've been watching the chat. I don't see any.
Good.
I've seen a couple comments. Someone asked, "Is this show current?" And the show is up now, and you can see it by appointment, right? If you
You can see it by appointment only, and otherwise you can look on the jamesbarronart.com site, and we have pictures. And maybe what we'll do is like post more. We have obviously lots of installation shots. We're going to be doing a video next week, which will be a walkthrough for the show, and I'm going to be talking, but we're also going to do a walkthrough video so people will get a great idea of the show.
Great. Well, you've done such a great job of like keeping her vision alive in the world. You and Susan and Joe Pierogi, who.
Yeah, Joe and Susan have some exciting news, which I'll let them share. Hopefully during their Zoom on January 14th, the show upcoming. And we're working to get a museum show together, especially of the large works. It seems like it would be such an achievement to share these with the world and let people walk through them. So
I agree. I think a show of her large scale drawings would just be so stunning and revelatory. And hopefully we can figure that out among us all of us who care about her work. Yeah.
Yeah. Carter, I do want to mention in closing that your understanding of her work, your commitment to her work meant so much. And when she would talk about you, she would say, Carter Foster, he's such a fine man. He's such a
So
fine
sweet.
human being. And, have you ever stood in front of a drawing with him and heard him talk about the drawing? Like, this is for real. This isn't for anything except that he just absolutely loves drawings. So,
She was a great person to talk. I mean, she was just a wonderful person to talk to about art. I mean, we shared a passion, and it was, it's easy to connect with someone when you share a passion like that, honestly.
well, I know that she would be grateful for today. So I would like to say, Carter, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. It's an honor I got so much out of knowing her, and also when I said that thing about karma, it really was, she had like a karma about her, that she introduced me, I got to know you. I think I met Susan and Joe through her and my friend Marty. It's just a wonderful thing. She was like
I
that.
hope that, those out there might tune in on January 7th, a reminder, Angela Dufresne, Judy Glansman, We're going to talk about Dawn and just that, her karma, her artistic circle. January 14th, Joan, Susan, and Pierogi. We're going to talk about exhibiting Dawn Clements. These massive works talk about a relationship between a gallery and an artist. They would do anything. They gave her the boiler. We're going to explore how she made it work that was 40 feet high. And Joan says, like, great, that's fine, let's do it. So we're going to keep this going. We might even add a fourth soon. Carter, thank you once again.
Absolutely, thank you. I see so many people I know making comments, so hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining. It's a pleasure.
Thank you again, Carter.
All right, take
Much
care.
appreciated. Take
Bye-bye.
care.